Oh, thanks. Cool. So, hi. I'm John Murphy. I'm a game designer and one of the co-founders of an indie studio called Young Horses. When we were students, we made this silly game, Octodad. And then, for some reason, the world allowed us to turn that into this game, Octodad, Dadliest Catch. And then, for some reason, all this crazy type of stuff happened to us. So I'm here to tell you kind of a coming-of-age story about how Young Horses got to this point and some of the values that we've uncovered along the way. So before we get into it, I want to tell you a little bit about myself, just so you have some idea of who I am. If you're familiar with any of the Young Horses, you might know this guy. He's out there somewhere. We originally proposed that Phil and I do this talk together, but the conference organizers felt it would be better for one person to give this presentation, which we thought was kind of peculiar, given that the talk is about collaboration and questioning the necessity of a singular authorial voice in making games. Anyway, again, I'm John. I'm from Chicago. I have a biology degree because when I was younger, I thought I was going to save the environment. And I went to grad school at DePaul University in Chicago to pursue my other childhood dream of making video games. And that's where I met all these cute boys. I was the producer on the original Octodad game, and I've mostly done level design on Dadliest Catch. Also, for the past 2.5 years, while working on the game, I've had a day job as an on-staff game designer, working with teachers to design curriculum at a school called Chicago Quest. There's my cute school picture day. So a little bit of intro about Octodad. Octodad started as an extracurricular student project where a couple of our professors, these guys, mock hired a group of 20 students with the goal of making a game innovative enough to enter into the Independent Games Festival, which was kind of a weird, interesting way of going about making a game for the IGF. When we started this project, most of us had never worked on a team of more than 5 people or so and hadn't really done a project that took more than a couple of weeks' worth of work to do. So, after several weeks of everyone pitching and prototyping various ideas, then refining those ideas and throwing everything out and starting over, one idea sort of came out of left field that we all kind of latched onto. A game that was purposefully difficult to control, inspired by the absurd physics of Jurassic Park Trespasser, starring an octopus with a human family. So we released the original Octodad in October 2010 and got a lot more attention than we expected to. We were one of the 8 IGF student finalists in 2011. So from working on the initial Octodad project, a group of us realized that we wanted to keep working with this team that we had made. And we wanted to maintain the sort of creative freedom and independence that we knew we wouldn't have if we tried to join other studios and scattered to the winds. So we decided to start our own studio called Young Horses. And we did what anyone would do back then. We did a Kickstarter. Not really to fund ourselves completely, but just to see if there was enough interest to make a game at all. So, and this was kind of a big Kickstarter back then. This was pre-Double Fine and all of that. So this was enough for us to be like, okay, cool, we can make this game. I should also mention that while all this was going on, pretty much all of us were working full-time jobs. Seth Parker, our sound guy, and myself both got jobs working at schools. Devin and Geisler, our 2 programmers, worked at a casino games company. Majdi, one of the other designers, started working on Facebook strategy games. So for most of development, Dadliest Catch was a nights and weekends kind of project. So we started working on the game and started our studio with a naive goal of finishing the game in a year. We finally released the game about a month and a half ago, 2.5 years after we'd started. So when we started this project, we had just graduated, we were still pretty young, and we had a lot of bad habits that carried over from working together as students, or just bad habits that we had as people and being immature. We were judgmental and defensive when it came to differences of opinion on creative decisions, and a lot of us took things really personally when we didn't agree on things. Generally, we didn't do a very good job of communicating or directly addressing conflict. So basically, we were pretty dysfunctional, and that resulted in a lot of people on the team being frustrated with each other a lot of the time. So eventually, Kevin Geisler, our producer, that's not actually how he dresses, but I think he should, he suggested that we do these quarterly reviews in an attempt to be more like a real company and have accountability for getting our work done. So the most useful part of this, it turned out, was sort of everyone having an opportunity to share the challenges and frustrations that they were facing in making the game. So it basically just turned into a big group therapy session. So in addition to the obvious benefits of checking in on how development was going and just seeing progress on the game every quarter, continuing to do these meetings had some interesting effects on the way that the team worked together. Listening to each other's thoughts and feelings started allowing us to build empathy for one another, even in situations where we really disagreed strongly on things. And building this empathy allowed us to, instead of trying to win arguments when we had them, it allowed us to try to understand these arguments. So our disagreements turned more into discussions about the ideas and allowed us to have more productive conversations without anyone taking things super personally or us offending each other. So for example, now when Kevin Zune, who was a creative director for Dadliest Catch, when he and I can avoid hostility when discussing simple things like, what's your favorite game so far in 2014? Where Zune can say that his favorite game so far in 2014 is Broken Age, and I can say that my favorite game so far in 2014 is the TV show True Detective, and we can have that discussion without strife. And the team can talk about more serious design decisions, like should Octodad change colors, like an octopus can camouflage itself. And when Chris, who is the lead artist on the game, wants to keep Octodad orange for art reasons, and designers want him to change colors for gameplay reasons, we can have that debate. And we can come around to Chris's idea that Octodad should stay iconic like Homer without anyone's feelings getting hurt. Chris is going to kill me when he sees this. Hi, Chris. Yeah. So, and when it comes time to pick our next project, and half the team wants to make a JRPG dating sim about cat people or something, and the other half of the team wants to make an augmented reality game that ruins your life, we'll be able to work through it and find something that everyone is excited about without anyone's feelings getting hurt or anything like that. Yeah. Something like that. Also, through this process, we became more comfortable with one another, which fostered more of a we're in this together sort of mentality, which, allowed us to get through finishing the game. I don't think all of us would have made it through to the end if we hadn't figured out how to talk to each other when we did. We learned how to trust each other, which started to change how the team worked together. We started to be less dismissive of each other's preferences and opinions. Arguments are more productive, or more willing to compromise, but not really in a design by committee sort of way. And we're more comfortable asking each other for help, so we get more support from our teammates, and we're able to get better faster at what we do. And that improved the trust and that improved trust and support that we have from each other allows us to take risks that are necessary for individuals on the team to grow and get better. And through this process, I don't know exactly what impacted what, but the game itself started to change too. So we started to think of Octodad as being more explicitly about empathy. And the narrative of the game became more about communication and acceptance. And we thought more about the point of view of Octodad's wife, Scarlett, and, put a lot of effort into trying to rewrite that relationship. So, we didn't do a perfect job because that happened pretty late in development, but, it's something that we started to think about more. So, the original game was meant primarily to be kind of an abusive game. And while we tried to retain enough of that abusiveness for the player to experience the struggle of being Octodad, we tried to lean a little bit more towards empathizing with and creating joy for the player. So we made Octodad a little bit less clunky, a little more accessible, changed the art style compared to the original game, which in the end I think allows players to be more open to putting some effort into thinking about what the game is actually trying to say, where otherwise it would be putting all of their energy into just trying to play the damn game. We also started to think about Let's Players and live streamers and their viewers and what needs are being fulfilled by this phenomenon. Their costumes are so good. I just had to put that in there. So this led us to more actively design the game for emergent comedy and self-expression and sharing with a community. Like, these are just a couple of screenshots that I pulled off of Steam that players had made. So these changes were, initially triggered by the creation of this dedicated space for communication that we had, and then this sort of spread out to the way that we work in general. And through this process of learning to understand, communicate, and empathize with each other, we figured out some shared values that we want to continue to build on as a team. So we want our games and our game-making practice to promote empathy between those of us on the team, empathy for our players, and empathy for people in general. And we want to focus on the growth of individuals on our team, and our ability to work collaboratively, which means that we want to work on projects with goals that allow everyone on the team to work towards some of their personal goals, and we want to work on projects that let everyone work on honing the crafts that they're passionate about developing. And we want to work on developing a growth mindset, which is a concept related to learning that I've been exposed to a lot working in education for the past few years. Basically, a growth mindset is the opposite of a fixed mindset. And a fixed mindset is sort of like the standard way of thinking about intelligence and talent, where they're static, and you tend to avoid challenges and try to avoid looking stupid and give up easily on what you're working on. Where people with a growth mindset think that intelligence can be developed through persistence and effort and good teaching. This is kind of an interesting thing to me because I've sort of noticed that a lot of game developers, to be good at making games, you have to have a growth mindset, and a lot of people seem to have this, where they're really good at just figuring things out on their own and tackling things and being persistent. But then when you talk to a lot of game developers, it seems like a lot of people have an attitude of, they express having a fixed mindset, which is kind of an interesting disconnect. If you're interested in this growth mindset stuff, just Google it, you'll find it. But anyway, so we hope that working to shift towards this sort of mindset will help us continue to improve and support each other in improving. Another realization that we've had is that we think that we can make good games with a lot of coexisting creative voices. So it's true that most of the best games in recent years, at least I think, most of them have had this sort of strong singular voice. And a lot of people have assumed that we have one creative genius on our team. This is a joke that we put in the game about Phil. And it's absolutely true that one person can make something great, and that games about individual experiences are extremely important, and that everyone who wants to make games should do so in whatever way they want to or have access to. But when I see something like this kill screen interview where Steve Swink, who I think is awesome and his work is great, by the way, where Steve is interviewed about scale, and he says about game authorship that the analogy that he likes to use is colors being mixed. If you have one person and their idea is a brilliant blue, then their color will shine in the finished product. But if you have 20 people and they have blue and red and green and yellow and they all want to get in, then what you end up with is this muddy brown crappy color, like baby poop. And when I hear that, well, so the first thing I hear, or I think of when I hear that, is that, yeah, our game has some muddy, crappy brown parts. I don't know what we were thinking with this stealth stuff that we put in the game. But maybe if instead of this like crappy brown with all these voices, if you really nail this collaboration and communication and empathy, then instead of that, maybe you end up with something like some sort of crazy psychedelic finger painting collage thing with like a narwhal or something cool like that. And when Zune tries to express an attitude like, I was creative director, so I was ultimately responsible for these design mistakes that ended up in the game, I say, no, we're all responsible for what happens with this game. And then we can talk through that and figure out what went wrong together. And that shared responsibility and ownership allows us as individuals to take risks, rely on each other, and continue to build that growth mindset in a way that is a lot harder when all that weight and pressure is on one person's shoulders. Oh, and another added benefit of this sort of shared ownership and responsibility is that we won't have the sort of problem of, our creative genius leader leaves, and as Brendan Keogh puts in his piece, Games by Humans, sacrificing the servants with the master. In an interview that Lee Alexander did with Steve Gaynor about Gone Home, he's quoted as saying, in a good game, you can feel the presence of the person who made the game. Which makes me think, well, in any game, you can feel the presence of the people who made the game. So in Octodad, sometimes it's like we're all there telling you sort of the same story. Whereas other times it's more like you're having sort of like a little private conversation in the corner with one or two of us, whoever worked on the specific aspect of the game that you're experiencing at that moment. And I think that if a game is made by a collection of people who are working together with this sort of creativity, collaboration, and mutual empathy and trust, then when you play the game, you feel the presence of a community. And I think that you can tell that a lot of love went into our game, but I don't think that there's a really strong singular voice, but instead the voices of a community. And our game isn't perfect. And one could argue that that's a result of not having that singular focus and voice. But maybe it's just because we're still learning how to work this way. This is our first game. This collaboration stuff is something we just sort of realized late in development that is important to us. And we clearly still have a long way to go, but we think that we'll be able to create much better games working this way than any of us could alone. Thanks. Questions, maybe? I don't know. Cool.
Hello. Other side. Oh, whatever. I was wondering, because I know some of the other IGF nominees from when you were nominated, and they specifically decided against making a sequel, whereas you seem to have decided for that. And just by what you recently said, it also sounded like almost like Octodad 2 or Dadliest Catch is kind of the game. Like this, you said it's your first game. Was that a conscious choice? Something you said like, we want to work on this some more? It isn't polished enough, or?
Yeah, I think we kind of think of the first game as sort of like a proof of concept. We worked on it for 5 months, and we didn't know what we were doing quite as well as we have gotten to, start to figure out over the past 2.5 years. So, yeah, I mean, and like as far as owning something as like a studio and the team that we have now, it is our first game. It's a little bit of a different entity. So, I don't know if that makes sense.
Can you talk a little bit more about specific processes, like what your general processes around the quarterly report process was?
Oh, I mean, that was pretty much just everyone, like, talking about what they had accomplished in the last 3 months.
Okay, so you didn't have like a lot of formality around it. It was just sort of you go around the room, everybody talks about.
Yeah, we're just sitting on couches talking to each other and like airing any grievances and things like that.
So I'm just curious why you decided on a 3-month structure as opposed to maybe something smaller than that. Like what was it? What made that the magic number, or did you just sort of go with it because?
I think that was pretty arbitrary, and then like I said, like that was just kind of a trigger for this sort of communication, and then after that, that just sort of became a little bit more of the norm of just like being honest and straightforward and respectful of each other.
Hi. So with all of this now in hindsight, if you look at the process, what would you do different next time? What are the biggest takeaways from Octodad, Dadliest Catch when it comes to making a game like this?
Let's see. Takeaways. I mean, well, going forward, we'll try to be a lot more straightforward and honest with each other, like from the start, and hopefully, you know, we in school a lot of our like mentors were very like traditional, like you know, like ex-Midway guys and things like that, who came from a much more you know, traditional, I guess, development structure. So some of those things carried over in a way that, like, you know, like the sort of like official meeting type of thing that we initially tried to do was sort of a carryover from that. So I guess continuing to try to figure out which of those structures work and when they do and don't, because we definitely, you know, there are realities of being a game studio and needing to get stuff done. So like some of that stuff is going to persist, but I guess continuing to figure out which of those things are valuable, if that makes sense.
What are your biggest pieces of fashion advice?
I
mean, come on, don't hesitate. We saw that you have a strong opinion. Okay.
Just, you know, be creative. Like, try to let your true self show. Like Zune in his nice leather jacket that was him photoshopped onto someone from Motorhead. I don't know. I can talk more about that some other time. I've got a lot to say about design and clothes.
Okay. See you in the afterglow room then.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Cool. Thank you.